Complex trauma is a psychological condition that is characterized by emotional and psychosocial responses that often impact youth's social development. There are various challenges that prevent youth from receiving therapeutic support in mitigating the psychological struggle developed from their unique traumatic experience. At the peak of COVID-19, an increase in emotional and psychosocial distress caused by social disruption in daily activities and social distancing regulation, resulting in many youth becoming depressed. The social uncertainties from the pandemic added in the psychological stressor in youth populations associated with complex trauma, and that adversely negatively impacted their mental well-being and influenced their social development. This is a capstone project that deals with counseling service to address complex trauma in youth that have experienced traumatic incidents, using trauma-informed intervention that can address stress-related trauma for risky behaviors, suicidal ideation, substance abuse, and emotional difficulty. Young populations have been plagued with traumatic incidents that have dire consequences on their behavioral outcome and their social development as it pertains to how they process stressful situation. Complex trauma is a psychological condition that requires trauma-informed interventions such as cognitive behavioral therapy that will help clients process their individual trauma experience that can help them stabilize their inappropriate social behaviors. Live traumatic experience will impact anyone's psychological well-being in various negative ways. That's why it is important to understand how traumatic events can lead to detrimental life-threatening problems such as substance abuse disorder, extreme psychological conditions, and other medical-related illnesses. The purpose for using cognitive behavioral therapy intervention is that it will allow the clients to express their version about the accounts related to their traumatic incident and how the events have influenced their emotional or prevented them from living positive life. Cognitive behavioral therapy is appropriate treatment strategy to use for people that have experienced traumatic events because it will give them the control in learning how to regulate their emotions and thoughts due to problems within their traumatic experience. Theory and framework for complex trauma is being approached using cognitive behavioral therapy, which will help young people struggling with substance abuse problems, psychosocial regulation, inappropriate behaviors, or adverse emotional problems can be led to discover in the trauma-informed care principle. Applying complex trauma intervention can possibly help traumatized victims gain emotional strength to overcome their personal encounters for victimization, to help rebuild their confidence, to navigate through the course of social obstacles that can re-trigger their traumatic incident or hinder emotional growth for psychological well-being. Trauma-informed care along with cognitive behavioral therapy are the two primary methods that will be utilized to address the problems for complex trauma through a holistic practice. Trauma-informed theory offer the quality in the care that will allow social workers to help clients receive services in a considerate way that can assist them with psychological or emotional issues that can address the form work of interconnectedness through compassion and empathy. This approach is a holistic framework in the treatment phase will allow social workers to develop interventions that cover the client's life in the steps of dimensional perspective utilizing trauma informed practice to address the areas of life in the physical, psychological, spiritual, social, and emotional, which is a broader area of human development and regulate unsafe behavior. This was the timeline that I used to implement my capstone project. Implementing my project involves several stages of trying to explain this psychological condition in a way that youths and their families could comprehend. The psychological distress that other youths have experienced due to complex trauma. The outcome was very receptive from individuals that possibly experienced complex trauma, disorder in behavioral dysfunction, and emotional regulation. I received so much support from my field supervisor and the agency that I am interning at on the information I provided on complex trauma. I am uncertain whether my field agency will implement my brochure on complex trauma. All the mental health information that is provided by my field placement normally comes from the Department of Mental Health or the Journal of Psychology. If the field placement does decide to utilize my brochure, it might have to be modified to represent the interventions that the field agency use as their core principle. My Capstone project reflects the Council on Social Work in several competencies that involve competency 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 9. It allowed anyone from diverse communities to utilize the information. This project was developed based on how it can improve the living conditions of all people. UNC et al. Conducted a study on showing how adverse childhood experience (ASA) led to juvenile delinquent developing complex trauma in Turkey between the ages of 14 through 18 years old. The link in complex trauma and social development represent how exposure to traumatic events shows strong prevalence of children developing complex trauma, which influence inappropriate behaviors and criminal activity, increase in substance abuse use, chronic mental disorder, and toxic stress symptoms. Many of the youths that had experienced severe traumatic exposure have experienced delinquent behavior problems that stem from their underlying emotional struggles. While DeSense and Smith considered the psychological effects on adolescents' mental well-being due to the deadly uncertainty of infection and emotional stressors from limited social engagement. Adolescents that have already experienced emotional stressors that is associated with complex trauma or other psychosocial related traumatic experience are prone to developing other psychiatric disorders beyond post-traumatic stress symptoms. Limited social engagement in adolescents that rely on social connection from positive peer groups or activities that offer them relief from their traumatic experience will cause these adolescents to be left without reliable safety system that they receive daily support from. In summary, Greenberg noted the difference in complex trauma and post traumatic stress disorder is that complex trauma criterion is characterized as being isolated individuals with excessive substance abuse problem whom is prone to suicidal thoughts. In the description of complex trauma, the author carefully explained how complex trauma is its own psychological criteria as a mental health condition that will negatively impact youth in adulthood life with emotional regulation and behavioral difficulties that will have dire consequences for leading a balanced life.